In today's video, I'm going to show you how I use the pentatonic scale, both the minor and the major variety, as a way of coming up with nice soulful double stop ideas. It's a really great thing to be able to do. You can use these kind of ideas as fills, or you can incorporate them into solos. And this is perhaps a less well-known way to use the pentatonic scale. I think when most people think of the minor pentatonic scale, it's kind of blues licks or rock licks, and the major pentatonic scale again is maybe kind of slightly sweeter rock licks or country licks. But equally, you can use this scale as a source of these really nice double stops. And if I were a slightly different type of YouTuber, I'd probably sell this to you in a better way. These are hacks to unlock the secrets of the pentatonic scale, to stop you making all of those mistakes that I know you're making, and to sound more pro. But as it is, this is just quite a nice way to use the pentatonic scale. So I hope you like the video. Let's get started. So that's just an example of the kind of thing I'm going to be talking about today. In that little playthrough, I was really just using the notes from the A major pentatonic scale / F sharp minor pentatonic scale, which are really the same thing. They share the same notes, and using those scales as a source of these double stop ideas. So I'm going to take you through exactly what I was doing in that playthrough. But to start with, I'm just going to talk more generally about how I think of this stuff. And I should say that all of the things that I'm going to be talking about in this video are going to be tabbed out. That's going to be up on my Patreon page. I'm also going to put my backing track up there as well, so check that out if you're interested. And if you're not already a subscriber of this channel and you like what I do, please hit that subscribe button. That's another thing that us YouTubers are always supposed to say. Boring, but it does help me carry on doing what I'm doing. I'm going to do this in the same key as the backing track, so A major, F sharp minor, and a good way into this perhaps might just be to think visually. And if we start down at this end of the fretboard, we've got the F sharp minor pentatonic scale, and you all know this one. It's just a pattern 1, box 1 minor pentatonic. I'm starting at the 2nd fret on the low E string. That's my root note, that's the F sharp. And what you can do to generate this series of double stops is just to connect the dots between the notes in the scale, essentially. So if we start with our root note here, I'm just going to connect that with the nearest note on the next string. So we've got this double stop shape, so the 2nd fret on both the 6th string and the 5th string, and then we just continue that through the scale. So the next note in the scale is at the 5th fret, and the nearest note on the next string is at the 4th fret. It's our next double stop, and then we just continue that process through the scale. If you like, you can learn that and drill that as a kind of scale exercise. And you don't really need to overthink it. You can just take those shapes and make some music with them. So just use your ear to guide you and connect those shapes together in some musically interesting and satisfying ways. But if you did want to take things a bit further and really understand what's going on here, then we've got this series of double stops. These are musical intervals, and mostly we're dealing with fourths here. That's kind of the characteristic sound that we're dealing with, but there is a major third in there as well. So if we just go through that, we're starting with this pair of notes here, the F sharp and the B, that's the musical interval of a fourth, the perfect fourth. And then the next little double stop, that's actually a major third, A to C sharp. And then we've got more fourths. So most of these intervals are fourths. We've got another major third there, and then we're back to fourths. So those are the intervals that make up this scale. Visually on the fretboard, you'll notice that fourths are generally speaking going to be this shape here, where both notes are on the same fret, and that actually holds true on all of the pairs of strings apart from when we've got the B string involved. So on the G and B strings, this shape here is actually the perfect fourth. We've got the notes on consecutive frets. You've got the fourth fret and then the fifth fret there, and the major third, you've got the major third down here, 5 and 4. When you're on this pair of strings, the B and the G, the major third is at the same fret. So this is something to watch out for, because visually you might think, well, that's a fourth like all of the other fourths, but because of the way the guitar is tuned, as soon as you come over onto this pair of strings, things have changed slightly. So this is actually a major third, and this is a fourth. And what we could now do is play around with these ideas, maybe come up with some little licks or phrases. So this is really something you can do for yourselves, but I'll give you a couple of examples. Maybe we could start with something like this. So just sliding on the middle pair of strings up and down with the first finger, and then coming down. A simple but effective phrase. We could try a variation on that perhaps. So that one starts in the same way, and then it goes higher. Really there are endless possibilities here. Just maybe give you one more. So it's a really cool sound, I think. And one important thing to be aware of is how these notes, these ideas are relating to the underlying harmony, to the chord that you're playing over. So these ideas, it could be F sharp minor pentatonic, it could be A major pentatonic. It's the same notes, but you want to be careful that the ideas you come up with are fitting in a satisfying way over the chord. So it's all about resolving these ideas in a musical way. And the first option you've got, maybe the best option, is just to use your ear. That will guide you. That will tell you which notes are going to sound good to come to rest on. But you could think of this in more of a theoretical way as well, and look at the notes in terms of how they relate to the underlying chord. So I'll give you an example. So if we're thinking F sharp minor and we've got these double stops, and some of these double stops contain just the chord tone. So here we've got a root and the fourth. Here that's the flat third and the fifth. Both those notes are in the chord, so that's a nice kind of resolved sound against this chord. And if we continue on up the scale, we've got the fourth and the flat seven. Here we got the fifth and the root. So again, that's nice and stable. Here we've got the flat seven and the flat third. That works well for that F sharp minor kind of sound. It gives you that F sharp minor seven sort of sound, and then we're back to the root and fourth. So all of these pairs of notes are actually going to sound really good against this chord, but some of them are perhaps going to sound a bit stronger to resolve to. So in particular, when you've got the root and the minor third, or the root and the fifth, that's going to sound very stable. So often you might end your phrases on those notes, like the examples that I gave. So ending up there on the fifth and the root, very stable sound against that chord. Again, ending on that same pair of notes, the fifth and the root. So with a lick like this one, that works very nicely over A major, resolving to the root and the third of the chord. It equally works for F sharp minor. So some of these licks are interchangeable, some of them will be more suited to the minor pentatonic or the major pentatonic kind of situation. All of that theory stuff, to me that's quite interesting, but ultimately of course use your ear and your musical judgment to tell you what sounds good and what doesn't. So that's the basic idea. And to start with, you might just like to explore the options that you've got in that first position of the scale. Then, of course, you can expand it into the other patterns of the minor or the major pentatonic scale. So if you already know your 5 positions of the scale, then you can do exactly the same thing in the other positions. I'm not going to go through all of that in this video. It will be slightly tedious, but I will tab all of this stuff out, but it's exactly the same idea. So you go up to the next position of the scale and just join up those dots, and you just get a nice series of double stops, and it works in all of these positions. And then you're back to where you started from, an octave higher. And you can drill that stuff as these kind of exercises, but clearly the best thing to do is just to spend some time noodling around making music with this stuff. And a further thing that I should mention, once you have got all of that stuff under your fingers, is thinking about the connections between these different boxes or patterns of the scale. I think often with pentatonic scales you tend to feel locked in these kind of boxes, but some of the best stuff, particularly with these double stops, comes from this kind of horizontal movement, sliding between these shapes. So particularly when you've got pairs of the same shape, it's really good just to slide up and down between these shapes and connect between the various different pentatonic patterns. So an example might be something like this. So connecting through multiple positions there. So you're starting up around the 12th fret and then coming down here. I'm kind of thinking caged here, so thinking of the underlying A major chord shapes. Coming down into this D position, and then you're ending up down here. Similar idea. You could start here, coming out of this E shape, A major pentatonic. So starting off in this position and then coming down into the kind of the G position of the scale. So tons of possibilities here. It's really just down to you to explore this stuff. I want to finish by just taking you through what I was doing, what I was thinking in my little playthrough at the top of this video. So it had kind of a soul type feel in the bass and drums. It was mostly just 2 chords. So it was starting on the A major chord, and then it went down to the F sharp minor chord, the relative minor, and I was trying to use these double stops, trying to cover quite a wide range on the fretboard as well. So I think the opening phrase I played went something like this. So I'm starting off at the 5th fret, coming out of this E chord shape, this pattern of the major pentatonic scale. Just those sliding between those shapes. So we've got these fourths here, slide between those, and then onto the B and G strings, it's the other 4th shape, slide between those. So that was the first half of the phrase, and then I think I went working my way down the fretboard on the G and D string, starting off here and then the fourth shapes there, so ending on those chord tones. That's the 5th and the root. And importantly, just trying to make it musically satisfying kind of a phrase. So this is where rhythm comes into play, and just your touch on the guitar as well. So you want to have a good kind of rhythmic feel, nice and relaxed. Just have those little slides between the notes. It really helps it. You sound a little bit less stilted. Sometimes where you've just got these double stop shapes, it can be a bit clunky. So use these kind of slides, gliding in and out of these notes, and it just makes it sound a bit smoother, a bit more musical. Then for the second phrase, it was something like this. started in a very similar way. Then I was climbing up a little bit higher on the top pair of strings. One nice thing to do here is just to visualize all of those double stops along a single pair of strings. So with the A major pentatonic, you would have a nice series of double stops, and then those are available to you to kind of slide, you know, up and down the length of the fretboard. So here I was just trying to find some musical ideas on that top pair of strings. Then on the backing track we're heading to the F sharp minor chord, and I did this. So just climbing up on the middle pair of strings. Now I'm thinking F sharp minor pentatonic in this position, and playing around with some of those ideas. I think I did throw in some single notes as well. Of course, when you're doing this stuff in a real musical situation, you're not just exclusively going to stick to these double stops shapes. You can mix it up with other things as well with single notes. So then we've got this. And on the backing track we're actually heading to an E chord, and I think this is the only point in my playthrough where I introduced a non-pentatonic note. So this G sharp note here, it's in the key of A major, but it's not in the pentatonic scale, but I wanted that note in there just so I could hit the major third of the E chord. So that's of course something that you can do. One possibility, it's slightly beyond the scope of this video, is that you can follow the chords with their respective major or minor pentatonic scale. So when you hit an E major chord, you can play the E major pentatonic scale. When you hit a D major chord, you can play the D major pentatonic scale, for example. So that's just an option that you've got. So you could think of this double stop here as it's played over an E chord, so you could think of that as coming from the E major. The E major pentatonic scale. But I'm not really thinking in those terms here. I just kind of wanted to hit that chord tone, just thinking about the underlying chord shape. And then to wrap up my playthrough, I was just playing some fourths on the top pair of strings, aiming for chord tone. So there's a D chord there, so I'm hitting the fifth and the root of that chord. So that's that. Pretty simple to play, but I was trying to be tasteful, trying to be melodic and interesting. Harder to do than you might think, just sort of making this stuff sound nice and musical. So you want to be thinking about your phrasing and you're really listening out for those chord tones so that you've got something that's melodically satisfying. So give that a try yourself. You can either play along to my backing track, or you can create a backing track of your own, perhaps use a looper and just lay down that very basic chord progression. Really just A major, F sharp minor, and then a quick E and D to turn it around, and then have a play around with some of these ideas. And that's it for today's video. I hope you found it interesting, and I hope you're able to use some of these ideas to incorporate them in your own playing. So good luck with that. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.